This is The Radio Station, a podcast about the radio industry with hosts Dr. Lynn O'Kelly and Dr. Rob Quick, presented by Routledge.
We are on the floor right now of NAB Show in Las Vegas. And actually, just walking around, Len, what are your thoughts?
I'm looking at a lot of these vendors and I'm thinking, what's AI going to do to half of these folks?
If we really look and start digging into the radio realm, we see that there's a lot of people interested in radio still.
We should look at maybe how radio is being presented in a newer form of technology.
Is radio dying? It's trying to, but it doesn't have to.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast for the radio station, 11th edition, forthcoming from Routledge Press. I am Dr. Len O'Kelly, along with Dr. Rob Quick. We're very happy to have you here with us as we continue this podcast series as the companion to the radio station textbook. What a fantastic trip it was to Las Vegas, Rob, wasn't it?
We just got back a few days ago, and aside from the great weather, which is always nice to have, we were very, very busy in the best possible way, talking with people, discussing topics and things that obviously are going to end up in the podcast and the book. So for me, I thought it was a fantastic success. What about you?
I would agree. We had a lot of people come to our session about this podcast for this book. We got a chance. It's always good to talk with educators who are kind of in the trenches working with the next generation of radio students and asking them, what are you hearing? What are your students saying? And having that dialogue. So what we thought we would do for this second episode of the podcast is sort of share some of those insights with you. We had a microphone in the session, and folks agreed to speak with all of us and all of you. So we thought it might be interesting to get their thoughts. So let's transport ourselves to the Las Vegas Convention Center and hear what's on the mind of folks as we consider a very important question: is radio dead?
So when we were sitting down to put all of this together, we were thinking, what needs to go on the podcast right off the bat? And one of the first questions, in fact, it's in the first episode, we start to talk about, is the question, is radio dead? This is an argument that I, for one, have to make to my administration about every fiscal year.
Yes.
They believe me, but it's one that you have to be armed with some information to be able to make an argument. But what I've been able to simply point them towards is, I have a class with 30 students a semester that think it's not. And, when in doubt, break that down into number of dollars per credit, and they say, you have our blessing. But on a bigger note, is radio dead? We just started thinking about that. And of course, obviously, we are sort of evangelists for the medium, but, what do others think?
So we're going to ask you this question in a second, so start thinking about one point you could make as to why radio is not dead. In your opinion, think about one point that you would make. But let me just say this. I've been at this conference, obviously, the last couple of days, and I've met people internationally. Obviously, I'm international myself, and they have said to me, this is amazing. They said, why is why are Americans so hard on the medium of radio? Why do they almost want to fulfill this prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy that radio is dying, it's irrelevant, no one's listening to it? Because radio around the world is a vital medium that is beloved and celebrated and still growing. Why are North Americans so incredibly hard on that? And that was a really interesting perspective. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, just as someone who's younger in radio and has a radio mic tattoo that everyone said I would regret one day, I don't. I've been at many panels for college students and college radio stations and all that across America, and there's still so many people that are very interested in radio. I think we look at the top tier companies that say radio is dying or they're changing everything, and that's where everyone gets their news. But if we really look and start digging into the radio realm, we see that there's a lot of people interested in radio still. So, I mean, for me, it's very important to always be at these things to show that, be the younger representation of those people.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I'm from Michigan, where Cumulus Media has started turning off signals that they've deemed aren't making enough money, right? And my thought is, don't turn these off, then sell them, please. We'd be happy to find people to buy them. I've been in conversations with people who would love the opportunity to reach communities. When you have the broadcast industry consolidated in that way, it's easy to grab the big headlines with, well, this company's turning this company's doing that. Only 11% of the radio signals in the United States are owned by the big investors. There's a lot of small market radio being done, and frankly, those are the best opportunities. Yeah. My best partner for my students right now is not an iHeart station or a Cumulus station or a Town Square station. It's a guy who got a low power license, and he got the station on the air by working overnight stocking groceries at a Meijer to be able to pay the power bill to get his 100-watt station on the air. And he has built it in to an absolutely indispensable resource for a community where my students go in and learn both the good and the bad, and they all come back saying, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it's those type of operators that are gonna keep us afloat.
So this is audience participation time now. Are you ready, Lance? Lance is our producer. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with that question, though. Can you think of one reason that we haven't mentioned why you think radio is still very much alive and kicking? If you put your hand up, Lance will come to you. But also know that you've got to say your name when you're in university, and obviously know that you are being recorded because we want to use it in the podcast. So do you have anyone want to step up?
Name and university?
Sean Isaacs, GM of Wolf Radio and Wolf Sports Network at the University of West Georgia. Most recent study came out and said 78% of Gen Z still listen to radio. That tells me that it is as vibrant as it was before, that the only reason that radio is dying is that these corporations don't know what the hell they're doing. So,
Couture Hill, Mesquite Schools,
What's the station?
88.5 KEOM. I believe when you asked the question, is radio dying, I had just triggered my mind, is television dying? And what I'm looking at, television has evolved, whether it was from the small, remember it started with radio, so where people used to have family time gather around the radio station to listen to the fight or listen to a show. We looked at, if you look at television, it started from black and white to color, and I think radio, it's not dying. I just think that maybe we need to look at how we are now evolutionizing it. How is it out there? How is it being transported? So we were looking at big flat screen TVs now look at what we have, projection. So maybe we should look at maybe how radio is being presented in a newer form of technology.
That's an interesting point, because I'm hard pressed to think, not counting sports, when the last time I watched live television was. Yeah. I'd have to think long and hard, and it's probably months, right? Whereas the radio's on every time I get in my car. Now, obviously, I'm older than our students, but I don't think I'm alone in that, right? Because we're so used to getting our video time shifted and on demand, but to kind of combine both points, when the chips are down, we want to know what's going on right in the second, and we don't want to hunt around and find. We want to have it, something there is a resource that's immediate and reliable, and radio is ideally suited for that.
And quickly, I want to add to that too, because being that I worked at an AM station in radio, which is still around today, I still to this day, if I'm driving into the city or anywhere in the tri-state area, I know that they're going to play traffic every 10 minutes. And so I tune into that because that's when I know what's happening. I can look at Waze, I can look at the GPS and see there's a red line on the map. But I don't know how bad this accident is. Is it a car pileup, or is it like the road is shut? So I want to know that so I can go a different way. But the only way I do that is through the AM station. And now they're on FM as well, which is helping their situation. But yeah, combining those two, it's definitely something that's evolving, but it's still completely relevant.
AJ Matthews, Pikes Peak State College, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Is radio dying? It's trying to, but it doesn't have to, okay? And here's the thing. The worst thing anybody can do is do it the same way because it's how they've always done it. And that's what corporate radio is doing. There needs to be some evolution, some innovation, spitballing, something along the lines of, we think about classic rock radio stations, CHR, AC, Top 40. Why do we have to pigeonhole it into these little formats? Why can't we do something like, podcasting? As in, this radio station is your true crime podcast radio station. This radio station is your DIY podcast radio station. Use the exciting, buzzworthy thing that we're doing with podcasting and put it on terrestrial airwaves.
If podcasting is teaching us anything, it's that people crave the human voice. right? It's the talk. I mean, because you can't do a music podcast and not run afoul of copyright. So it's primarily a talk medium. People love it, obviously. I mean, when I ask my students at the beginning of a term, what podcast do you listen to? They've all got an answer. All right, they're all connected to it. And I say, you do realize that's a lot like radio, right? Well, I hadn't thought of it like that. Yeah, it's exactly like that.
I've always said that because one of my examples, KFI in Los Angeles, I worked there too, and they always had a very unique set of shows on their station. You know, it could be like a DIY, it could be a food show, it could be the news in the morning. And basically what I've always said is that podcast is what radio was before we added so many commercials and stop sets and took away all the talk part of it. Because I feel like podcast is a long form, what radio used to be when, you know, you would listen to a radio show. They had personalities, they had people. It wasn't just talking heads. So I completely agree with that.
Steve Cease, WZND Radio at Illinois State University. The radio stations that are successful are leaning into what radio can do that podcasting cannot do. I'm glad you guys brought up live, which is usually the first thing that comes to mind. Local is the next thing that comes to mind. I live in a community where the newspaper has been replaced by our local NPR station as the historical record of our community. They're really the only people who are delivering local news on a consistent basis. The other thing that podcasts can't do, very well at least yet, is live audience interaction. You know, a podcast might have a mailbag, but that's totally different than having the ability to call in and have a conversation with the person on the other end of the speaker. So stations that are leaning into those things that podcasts can't do are the stations that are being successful right now.
And that's why I think the best radio in this country is being done in the small markets right now. So where I am, Grand Valley State is near Grand Rapids, which is the second largest city in Michigan, so therefore the second largest radio market in the city. There's nobody live after 5 o'clock. No one in the whole city. All of the radio stations, if the tornado comes through at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, I don't know what's going to happen right now because everybody's at home. They've automated everything out of its existence. I take that back. There's one community station and the NPR station that we run have got bodies in it. That's it, out of 35 signals. Live is what people look for. They want that interaction. Otherwise, why don't we just crank AI on everything and call it a day? All right, if we're going to do that, which I don't think anybody here would advocate for. I certainly wouldn't. I'm not a fan. I lost my biggest voice client to AI earlier this year because they decided we don't need a person, we can have the robot do it. And if we're not careful, that's the direction that the industry might see itself headed.
Name and school.
Derek Wood, WDRDL, Ashland University. I don't think radio dies when stations are connected to communities. You know, think, who's going to cover the 4th of July fireworks broadcast? Who's going to cover the Christmas parade? You know, our students at Ashland are sitting with the mayor every Wednesday morning and talking about civics issues. Not only do they connect with the mayor on a personal level, they get a civics lesson in the process. So when you're connected with the community, radio stations don't die, but the stations have an obligation to be connected to their communities in the most intimate way possible.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And if you can tie into that localism, you're going to survive, I think. And that's why also, I come from the college radio community as well, and I think college radio sometimes has a bigger audience off campus than it does on. I mean, it's weird because sometimes you've got to fight to get your own administrators to even care about your existence. So that's why the idea for College Radio Day, which was founded 15 years ago, have 1,000 colleges and university radio stations participate now. And I say to stations, use this day to justify your existence, to be proud. One of the best stations in the country is right here. Their GM factory advisor, Sean Isaacs, The Wolf. They won Signature Station, right? You won Signature Station and all these other awards. And Sean, from year one with College Radio Day, they took it and they ran with it and they used this as an event to celebrate themselves, to have a huge high profile, to recruit, to do fundraising, to raise money or get blood drive, food drive, whatever. It's incredible to sort of make a noise about yourselves. It's those college radio stations who kind of like are forgotten about, and they're in serious danger of just, well, hang on, we said we're college radio stations, let's just get rid of that. So you have to be very local and you have to be very proud and be a huge advocate for what's going on in your local community.
I think we're at a point too, and wasn't my intention when I woke up going into this panel this morning to offer societal observation, but maybe this is the opportunity to do it. We want that connection. We are starving for connection. If there's one thing that the isolation of COVID taught us, it's that it's not good to not know what's going on in our own communities. When you go into a new place, what better way to learn about what's happening than to follow what local media does? I remember years ago, and this is probably 30 years ago, I was on a driving tour and I was somewhere in Alabama. I did not know where I was. And I picked up a local radio station in the car, was tuning around the dial as I tend to do when I drive. And a truck full of merchandise had broken down in the middle of a town. And a local radio station set up and was broadcasting live from the back of the truck as they were selling the merchandise off the truck. And it was probably the most compelling 45 minutes of radio I'd heard in years. He was absolutely the sort of man on the street. Oh, Mrs. Johnson's here. She's looking at a washer and dryer. I don't know these people. I don't care about these people. I want to know if Mrs. Johnson's getting the washer. I was invested in that program. And it taught me a lot about that community. Now, I didn't exactly go back home and say, I have an idea. Here's what we got to do. But I thought, this is what, another driving tour, I heard Little League Baseball on the radio. Like, and that's ball 4. That's the 11th walk of the inning. It's not great content, but boy, was it interesting. And it taught me a lot about that community. And I think we've all got things going on in our communities that just aren't being shared. You know, we turn to, do you have a Facebook Informed where you live? Or a page where it's the neighbors basically just, yeah, those aren't great. That's not a positive view of any community. I've never seen one that reflects positively on the community that it serves. But we as broadcasters have the opportunity to do exactly that. There's things going on in our local communities that are fantastic. And I think we have not only an opportunity, but an obligation to showcase them.
We'll take one more comment on this. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Lan Asante, Volunteer State Community College, WVCP 88.5, Gallatin, Tennessee. The question, is radio dead, is asked at our school as well. And I sat in a couple panels yesterday, listening to Gen Zers talk about radio and podcasting. And what came to my mind after listening to that is that the same things that make good storytelling, that make good content, that make good talent are the same across the board. The cell phone has been, radio's greatest enemy, but it's also created a generation of people, a huge generation of people that are content or medium agnostic. They want the information and they don't really care, I don't think necessarily, how it gets to them, because the cell phone kind of disguises that. Because whether you're listening to a terrestrial broadcast, you're listening to an internet stream, you're using the same app, you're using the same technology, you're doing it the exact same way. So I think corporate radio is killing us because they are decontenting the very stuff that we've been talking about in this room today out of radio. But the stuff that was successful in the past, excellent talent, community connection, okay, good content, good sound, these things are universal and can apply to a small AM radio station or the biggest FM in a major market. So, yeah, someone said radio isn't dead, but we're sure trying hard to kill it. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think if we turn out students that have got the skills and the talent, they're going to keep some kind of audio storytelling alive.
So there you have it. That was an excerpt from a really quite exciting and interesting session. I want to thank Lance Liguez for being our producer from UTA Radio, University of Texas Arlington. Dana Schaefer, who was also on the panel with us as well. I thought it was a great session. And then, Len, you and I, we took the plunge, didn't we? We decided to walk the floor of the NAB show. And this is what it was for us, just as we're walking around. And we are on the floor right now of NAB show in Las Vegas. And actually, just walking around, Len, what are your thoughts?
I'm looking at a lot of these vendors and I'm thinking, what's AI going to do to half of these folks? I mean, there's some great products here, no question. There's things I don't begin to understand, but also some of these things I'm looking at and thinking, can't the software just do that? What are the jobs that are going to be protected or less vulnerable?
Yeah, and as I look around, I'm looking at a lot of names. Frankly, I'll be honest, I thought I knew. I mean, the major players are here, obviously, but there's a lot of smaller companies that don't have perhaps the square footage of some of the bigger companies in terms of what they have their tables, their booths, or whatever you want to call it. Some of them are, we just saw one with an actual full bar with wine and beer and stuff. But so how are these smaller companies? I mean, it's important that they're here, I guess, to show that they're here and to be a presence, but how can they compete with some of these bigger companies, do you think?
I have to wonder for some of them, what percentage of their annual take every year is generated here? Like, how vital is it to be in this room at this time?
Yeah.
And that's why they're here. The only reason I can think of.
Yeah, and we're actually heading towards the UK pavilion because I'm interested to see who's here from the UK. But, you do have the major, you've got Thomson Broadcast, Gates Air.
All the board manufacturers, so if they make a board, they're here.
So just, we're literally walking as we're talking, but it's incredible to see all this. It is impressive. When you actually walk around, if you've never been to NAB before, it's almost overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, there's more to take in than I will need some downtime.
Yeah. Let's see what there is.
So there you have it, a little bit of the sights and sounds of the BEA and NAB for 2025 from Las Vegas. Always excited to be a part of that, and always kind of rejuvenating to be in a room full of people who love radio. After all, that's what this podcast is about, and that's what this textbook is about. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Radio Station 11th Edition podcast. We will talk to you soon.
Cheers.